Few films capture the tension of their time quite like Red Dawn. Released at the height of Cold War fear, it shocked audiences with its teenage resistance fighters, relentless action, and a premise that felt disturbingly possible. But behind the explosions lies a deeper story, one filled with controversy, danger, and decisions that changed Hollywood forever. And it all begins with something that reshaped the entire film industry. Before this movie, Hollywood had a problem. The rating system simply wasn't keeping up. Films with intense violence were still being labeled PG, and parents were pushing back hard. After backlash from movies like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and Gremlins, filmmaker Steven Spielberg urged the industry to create a middle ground. That's where Red Dawn comes in. It became the first film ever released with the PG-13 rating, a decision that opened the door for a whole new kind of blockbuster. Suddenly, studios could push boundaries while still reaching younger audiences. That one change didn't just affect this movie, it shaped decades of filmmaking. But the controversy didn't stop there. At the time, Red Dawn was labeled one of the most violent films ever made. Analysts counted over 100 acts of violence per hour, and even the Guinness World Records recognized it for that distinction. Critics were outraged. Advocacy groups protested. Headlines exploded. And ironically, all that backlash turned into free promotion. The more people complained, the more curious audiences became, and the more tickets the film sold. What started as controversy quickly became cultural momentum. But the movie you see today almost looked very different. Early drafts of the script, then titled 10 Soldiers, were much quieter and more introspective. It focused on the psychological cost of war rather than large-scale action. That changed when director John Milius stepped in. Milius transformed the project completely. He expanded it into a bold, patriotic guerrilla war epic, filled with intense combat and ideological edge. The final version barely resembled its original concept. It became bigger, louder, and far more divisive. To make that vision feel real, the cast didn't just act like soldiers, they trained like them. Before filming began, the young actors were sent through a grueling military-style boot camp. They learned to handle weapons, survived in harsh outdoor conditions, and pushed themselves physically and mentally. By the time cameras rolled, they weren't just pretending to be a unit, they felt like one. That authenticity shows on screen. The camaraderie feels real because it was earned. And that cast? It turned out to be a launching pad for future stars. Actors like Patrick Swayze, Jennifer Grey, Lea Thompson, and Charlie Sheen all appeared together before becoming household names. For Sheen, it was his very first feature film. Looking back, it's remarkable how many major careers began in one film. But behind the scenes, the production was anything but easy. Filming in the mountains of New Mexico meant dealing with brutal cold. Conditions were so harsh that Patrick Swayze reportedly suffered frostbite during shooting. The discomfort wasn't acting, it was real. And that suffering translated directly into the film's gritty realism. Danger wasn't limited to the weather. During one explosive scene, Charlie Sheen was struck in the eye by debris from a blast, halting production. In the 1980s, there were no digital effects to fall back on. Everything was practical, and that meant real risk. Even the film's large-scale action scenes came with unexpected chaos. During the famous parachute drop sequence, strong winds scattered the stunt performers across the landscape. Some landed far off course, and one even ended up stuck in a tree. What was meant to be tightly controlled turned into something unpredictable, but also more realistic. Sometimes, accidents made the film better. Other moments, however, didn't survive the editing room. A romantic scene between Lea Thompson and her co-star was completely cut to maintain pacing. Another sequence, featuring soldiers inside a McDonald's, was removed after a real-life tragedy made its inclusion inappropriate. These decisions reshaped the film's tone, making it more intense and unrelenting. And then there's the line that outlived the movie itself. Wolverines. What started as a battle cry in the film became a cultural symbol of resistance. Fans shouted it at events, quoted it for decades, and carried it far beyond the screen. In fact, the film's influence went even further than pop culture. In 2003, during the mission to capture Saddam Hussein, the U.S. military named the operation Operation Red Dawn. Target locations were even labeled Wolverine 1 and Wolverine 2. A fictional story had crossed into real-world history. That kind of impact is rare, and it speaks to how deeply the film resonated. Part of that resonance came from timing. Released during peak Cold War tension, the idea of a foreign invasion didn't feel like fantasy, it felt possible. Audiences weren't just watching entertainment. They were confronting their own fears. And that's why the film still works today. Modern viewers may see it differently, but the core themes, resistance, survival, and national identity, still hit hard. Each generation finds something new in it. That's the mark of something more than just an action movie. More than 4 decades later, Red Dawn remains a powerful cultural artifact. It changed Hollywood's rating system, launched careers, sparked debate, and even influenced real military operations. Behind the scenes, it was as intense and unpredictable as the story it told. And maybe that's the real reason it still matters. Because sometimes, the stories behind a film are just as powerful as what ends up on screen.